Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. Here you can grow your knowledge about marketing operations, listen to ideas and strategies to help you scale, grow, and optimize your efficiency, drive your speed to market, and enrich your work life. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Kymm Martinez, Chief Marketing Officer at the American Cancer Society, the leading cancer-fighting organization with a vision of ending cancer as we know it for everyone. Thanks for joining us today, Kymm.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, to begin, as a way to sort of shed some light on your fascinating background and as sort of a key principle in your career, you have gone in your career from nourishing lives to transforming lives. And now you are into saving lives. And all of those three phases have been throughout your entire career experience. So let's go back. Please walk us through those three major stages in your career, because I think it's fascinating.
Oh, sure. In fact, I had a colleague recently ask me, what's next? Are you going to be bringing people back from the dead? Is that going to be the next stage of your career? No, but I am actually a marketer through and through. Marketing has been something that's been in my blood from early on. Right in college, my very first internship that I ever had, randomly, I was assigned to the marketing department. I absolutely loved it. It was in a bank, and I haven't actually worked outside marketing since. So my first job out of college was with financial services and again in marketing, and I loved it, but really felt like I was teaching more than I was learning. And at the age of 26, it didn't feel like that was the right, I wanted to be learning more. And so I made the commitment to go back and get my MBA. I went to the Kellogg School at Northwestern specifically with the intention of transitioning into consumer packaged goods, because from the vantage point that I was in, I felt like consumer packaged goods had that classic marketing training that I was really looking for to really get the basics down. Not really thinking I was going to necessarily stay a long period of time, but that's what I was really looking at. So entered General Mills, which is nourishing lives. So that was the very beginning, obviously in the food space. Moved to Minneapolis and Minnesota as a result of that. And absolutely love that. 100% that General Mills delivered on the classic marketing training. In CPG, having the P&L responsibility reside in the marketing function was just such a terrific way to get business fundamentals in my toolkit. I also never had to talk about the value of marketing because I was in a company that automatically understood the value of marketing. So I realized later when I transitioned out of that was a bit of a luxury that I had at the time, but it just became sort of part of the water and what I was drinking there. At General Mills, I did have an opportunity to work internationally, which was so incredible. When you get an opportunity to put yourself in environments that are just so different from anything you've been before, I really do feel like that's where you grow the most. I was stationed in Mexico City for 3 years and worked all across Latin America and absolutely loved it. So stayed there for almost 20 years before I was like, okay, like, am I in the CEO track or am I in the CMO track? And really decided that I wanted to stay on the CMO track. So started to look around for another opportunity, and in came St. Thomas, which is the largest private Catholic university here in the state of Minnesota. They were looking for a first ever CMO, looking to transform their group. So there's the transforming lives through education. I was lured by the challenge of building a marketing organization pretty essentially from scratch. That's what the president had hired me to do. I did not know if I was going to be able to do that, which is kind of what attracted me to that opportunity in the first place. And then the branding challenge of St. Thomas is interesting because within our state, within Minnesota, it's pretty well known and very well respected and has a lot of really terrific programs, but not as well known outside of the state. So that was my branding challenge, is how do you increase brand recognition, but doing it on a fraction of the budget that I would have had, at General Mills, sitting on a Cheerios or a Chex Mix or Pillsbury, some of those really big brands. So as a marketer, I found that really interesting. Plus, I loved the people, loved the university, but then the American Cancer Society tapped me on the shoulder. And so that's where saving lives comes into play. And as a marketer, the opportunity to work on a brand that's so nationally well known, but whose branding challenges, people don't necessarily understand the impact that the American Cancer Society has, as well as just the mission. Cancer is something that has affected my family, as it has many, many families, and I couldn't turn down the opportunity to tackle this challenge and to once again build a marketing organization, but this time significantly larger than the marketing organization that I was building before, and folding in digital fundraising, direct mail, all sorts of fundraising components that were new to me. So therefore, that also made the opportunity exciting.
Fascinating background. I love that. Thank you so much for sort of walking us through that. As when we chatted before, my family has been impacted by cancer in many ways. My mom, my dad, my sister, and as I'm sure so many people have been affected by cancer. And but what I find fascinating is just the energy in which you bring to every single career challenge, even now, years after every one of those experiences, and still how much energy and passion just in how you are talking about those experiences. And so my next question would then be so how have you found the lessons that you've learned in each of those career opportunities? How do those compare, and how do they sort of go beyond the industry in which you were in at the time to sort of the lessons more broadly as a marketer from each of those locations? And how are you sort of leveraging those today?
Yeah. It's funny. There are definitely marketing principles translate across organizations and across industries, but they might translate in a little bit of a different way. So for example, one thing that for sure translates is the need to have a point of difference and to make sure that your point of difference is compellingly told and people can really kind of wrap their heads around it. Now, when I was at General Mills working on Cheerios, it's entirely possible to, within the cereal category, find that one thing. We used to call it the single point of difference. We used to put that on all of our briefs that we wrote, when we were creating advertising with our agencies, that single point of difference that you could really talk about, within that category. Fast forward to higher ed. Now, all of a sudden, it's 5,000 universities and colleges across the United States. Very difficult to find one thing that you can say that's different from competitors, but yet what I came to think of it as the point of difference cocktail. So the combination, there were 4 or 5 different things that put together created a very distinctive space for the University of St. Thomas. And so it's still a point of difference, but it's just a little bit of a different way of thinking about it than what I would have done at General Mills. So
a broader value proposition.
Yep, a broader value proposition that's a little bit more of a cocktail. At the American Cancer Society, we're back into a little bit more of a single-minded, we can really talk about what we do that's different from some of the other cancer organizations. But I just think the notion of wrapping your brain around what is it that makes you different, whether it be one thing or whether it be a combination of things that you can't find somewhere else, is important. I also think that the principle when you're marketing of always starting with an insight, of always really understanding your consumer. And you'll always hear me use the word consumer versus customer, because I come from the General Mills world where the customer was the Walmart, the Targets, and the consumer was the end user. So in my mind, it's really always understanding, that end user, the person who's going to be interacting with your organization. What's an insight? What's a problem that you're trying to solve for them that you can build off of? That's something that remains the same as you go across. The importance of starting with objectives. That's always really important too, knowing what it is you're trying to do, what audience you're trying to reach. I know that sounds pretty basic, but especially as you get outside of or as I've gone outside of environments a little bit less accustomed to marketing, the tendency to start with a tactic and just say, well, let's just do a video short, or let's do a podcast, or as opposed to really thinking through, well, wait a minute, what are we trying to achieve? What do we know about this audience? What's motivating about them? That kind of thing becomes really important. I also think as a final consistency across this notion of a matrix environment, even though at General Mills marketing had the on paper and in actuality the decision-making power, the ultimate decision-making power, you wouldn't want to go there and pull your positional power card, without first like really listening to your cross-functional team and what they were saying and the ideas that they were bringing to the table. And so that notion of that matrix, that I see no matter where you're doing marketing, and right now marketing doesn't have the positional power either in higher ed or in nonprofit in the way that it did in CPG, but that notion of working with your peers, collaborating, showing you're listening, bringing people along, the importance of influencing, all of those skill sets, very transferable, I've found across environments.
So let's take then the three organizations. So General Mills, St. Thomas, American Cancer Society. But I'd like to raise it up a level of abstraction. So you've now then worked at a for-profit organization, a nonprofit private organization, and now a nonprofit charitable organization. So now when you think about marketing operations, et cetera, looking at it at that level, not necessarily the organizational or the services and, customers and consumers that you were, engaging with there, but raising it up to that level, how is marketing different at those organizations, thinking nonprofit, for-profit, nonprofit, charitable, et cetera? Any other unique distinctions?
Yes. One distinction is just how people think about marketing to begin with. I think that in the for-profit world in particular, people understand that if you're going to generate sales, if you're going to bring consumers to the shelf, whatever it is that you're trying to do in the for-profit world, that marketing is a path and a means and a way to get you there. So there is an understanding of that. You move into other worlds, like the higher ed world, as an example. It's easy for some folks, often it's faculty or people who are really proud of the academic product, that might think, why do we need marketing? Why, if the product is excellent itself, doesn't it sell itself? And to which I always replied, well, Cheerios is an excellent product, but it also doesn't sell itself. You need to remind people of it and make sure that the relevancy is always there. So that's something that I have found across environments I've had to do a little bit more of, is explaining the value of marketing. And actually, frankly, it keeps me on my toes. I actually, in some respects, like that, because I can't be complacent about just, well, don't you get that my whole function is adding value to the organization in a way that you can clearly see and understand? It forces us as marketers to make sure that we're always thinking about the value that we're adding and asking if there's a way to do it differently or a way to do it more efficiently or a way to do it in a stronger way. So, yeah.
It's interesting how you phrase that it's not only reminding, using your CPG example, it's not only just reminding your consumer about the value of Cheerios, it's reminding the customer, your channel, you're the buyer, reminding them about the importance and the value of Cheerios, but also your internal stakeholders, your internal partners, reminding them as well about the value that your marketing team brings every day, and all the way through that whole channel process to actual execution of the product into the market. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, well, and I've read studies and attended CMO conferences where they talk about how the CMO role in particular is one of the shorter tenured roles in the C-suite. Yeah. And often why that is because, again, you get into differences in opinion about the value, that's being added. And so I just think that those of us that are in this profession, the more we can stay in front of it ourselves and ask ourselves and have our teams asking themselves first, what more can we be doing? It's so much stronger than obviously the organization waiting for the organization to ask you that. Then it might be a little bit on the too late side. So I've always tried to just make sure that our teams are staying one step ahead of that. The other nice thing, so in for-profit, you've obviously got shareholder dollars, that you're playing around with, which is obviously really important. And, you care about that. You want to give a return back to shareholders and to stakeholders. But when you get into higher ed, it's, at least at St. Thomas, it was mainly tuition dollars. So now you're dealing with students who are giving their money to this institution that you are then helping to shepherd. So there's just an extra burden, I think, there to make sure that you are really stewarding those resources in a way, because we all know how expensive tuition dollars can be. And the same at the American Cancer Society. For us, it's all about donor dollars. And, people are giving to us because they want to help more people survive cancer. And so it's really important that we think about that and that we're being really good shepherds of donor dollars, which I always felt like I was being a great shepherd of, or wanted to be a good shepherd of shareholder dollars. But it takes on a different impact when again you're impacting lives in a different way and the dollars are coming from different places. So that's another dynamic that I think just sort of ratchets up, for me, the accountability.
That's a brilliant perspective. And let's dive into then a practitioner tip here, or practitioner feedback. So obviously throughout all of these career experiences, you have gained so many tools, so many techniques and insights along the way that have made you a better marketer. So what are some of those key insights, lessons that you've learned along the way that any practitioner can use and implement tomorrow, in terms of building out, either marketing processes from scratch or enhancing marketing operations, et cetera?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing that I've learned, and you actually touched on it a little bit early in this interview, is the importance of keeping your personal energy strong and intact, because it takes a lot of energy to build a marketing organization from scratch. And I think even no matter where you are in today's world, with the constant amount of change that we're all faced with, it takes a fair amount of energy to be able to kind of just continue to go. So store your energy, have grace, kind of like with yourself. But I think the other really important thing, especially as a leader of a marketing organization, is to set that vision and to be really clear about what it is that you will be doing and what you won't be doing. Jim Collins wrote that really terrific book, Built to Last. I want to say it might now be 20 years, but I still feel like I refer to some of the thinking in that book. And one of the things he talks about is the importance of making sure that it's really clear to your organization, and in my case, my department, where my bus is going, and get the right people on the bus, and then to make sure that if there's somebody on the bus who shouldn't be there, to get them off the bus. And the way in my brain to do that best is just to make sure that it's, again, crystal clear where the bus was going. When I first got to the university, as an example, there were some people that were uncomfortable with the notion of working in a marketing department. I'd actually never encountered that in my career before, and mainly, of course, because I came from CPG, where the value of marketing was never questioned. But in higher ed, there were people asking me if marketing was unethical. And they were coming at it from a viewpoint of a worry that marketers might be spinning things, for sales purposes that might be diluting consumers at the end of the day, which was so shocking to me, because in my mind, and the way I explained it back is like, well, first of all, I don't think there's anything unethical, obviously, about what marketing is. What I think marketers have are spotlights, and they are not going to shine their spotlight everywhere, but they're going to shine it on the places that make the most sense, kind of like for the organization that they're representing. But that doesn't mean that if somebody wanted to find information in other places that they couldn't. So by being really clear to the teams, this is a marketing bus, this is what we're doing, this is what we're being asked to, it enabled people who were attracted to that vision to say, yes, I want to be part of that. And for people who were like, you know what, that doesn't feel comfortable for me, to opt out of it, which kind of ladders into another lesson, which is the importance of the right people in the right places. And especially with change and, overhauling organizations, if you get anyone on your team that's toxic, and toxic people tend to, not have the best of attitudes. They can infect a lot of other people kind of like around them. And I think in the beginning, my thought was to try and do absolutely everything I could to bring the toxic person over to the bright side and to really win them over, kind of like as to what they're doing. But if you try and you see quickly that that's not going to happen, you got to move to separate the person from your organization, because toxicity grows, and it's not in the best interest of the organization to have that stay. So So that focus on culture and making sure that you're clear about the kind of culture that you want to build, I think is really important. One of the things, actually, I started it 22 years ago, but I've done it every year in every job that I've been in. I have this thing called a deep breath offsite, which we have annually. And I specifically call it a deep breath because it provides the team with an opportunity to take a step back from the day to day, to take a deep breath and to look at where we're going and how, do we feel good about where we're going? Do we want to make some course corrections about where we're going? Because I think sometimes in the day-to-day, there's so much coming at you that you can just run, and forget to ask, well, where are we going? And do we feel like that's the right place that we should? So building in moments where you actually take stock of where that is, including how do people feel about working. I'm a firm believer that it's not just the what you do, but it's the how you get there that is so important. If you achieve your goal, but your team crosses the line bloodied and bruised and battered, that's not a win. You want you want the culture to lift people up. So I think that's another lesson that I've learned, is the importance of focusing on that.
That's an excellent lesson. I remember Lou Gerstner, the former CEO of IBM, in his book, I think it was Who Says Elephants Can't Dance, something like that, I think. In his book, he described that if you want to change a company, change its culture first. And to me, that is such a brilliant spotlight, back to your point, on the primacy and the importance of culture. I love that. And I also appreciate you sharing some of the challenges along the way, such as what you mentioned, where, when you go to an organization and maybe there's really no understanding of why should we even have marketing. That's really a fascinating one. But when we spoke before, I remember you shared with me a kind of quote, freedom within a framework idea. And I thought this was really, really fascinating. So could you just take a few moments and explain what a freedom within a framework idea is and how it works really well within marketing and specifically for branding?
Yeah. So this is something that I developed, this thought, working with organizations where there's a central enterprise marketing group that also is working with in the case of higher ed, it's different schools and colleges that also have their own marketing. In the case where I am right now for the American Cancer Society, it's the regions, it's the local areas, and how do you, as a marketer, harness the energy and the creativity and the power of all the folks that are outside that central area, but yet working toward and building toward a consistent brand, so that you're not saying different things, in which case you're splintering your messaging, but how do you get everybody rowing in the same direction, if you will? So that's what freedom within a framework does, or at least the way I've conceived of it. So there is a framework that is provided by the central team that's based on insights, that's based on all of our best thinking in terms of, all right, this is the direction the area that we're going to play in. Now there's freedom within that to bring local creativity or other creativity to it, so that the message then becomes very local, customizable. A lot of times local messages are more powerful than something we could do nationally that we're just forcing out locally. So it's about taking the power of that whole organization and being consistent with how we're directing that power. Now, the trick there is, what's the freedom and what's the framework? As I learned the hard way, kind of at the American Cancer Society, we rolled out a whole new Get Screened program. And we had some local markets completely rework the campaign. And when I called to say, wait a minute, why are you doing that? They pointed to freedom within a framework. And they thought that Get Screened was the framework. I'm like, no, that's not the framework. The framework is broader. There's elements here. This part is the freedom. So I've learned actually that the clarifying what's the freedom, what's the framework, actually is also the magic to making that happen.
That's fascinating insights there. Okay, so let's switch gears then. So when you think about physical marketing impressions, things like, promotional items, signage, a trade show booth, direct mail materials, marketing brochures, etc., how do you look at integrating physical marketing with digital marketing strategies to then create an overall integrated marketing strategy for a company or an organization?
I think the integration of all of that is really important. I know that sometimes, in the for-profit side, they'll call that, omni-channel marketing. And in my mind, it's almost like omni-touch point marketing, kind of like as we think about it, we want to take that consumer and that journey or that experience that the consumer is having with your organization across touch points and want to make sure that they're consistent and that also we're helping that consumer to deepen their relationship with the organization. So at the American Cancer Society, as an example, we do a ton of events all across the country. We have Relay for Lives and Making Strides Against Breast Cancer and Hope Galas and Discovery Balls. And all of those interactions for some of those people are the first way for some, or in some, the only way they're interacting with the American Cancer Society brand. So how do you make sure that those brand touch points are consistent? And then how do we take somebody that's in a physical space of ours and find out how to recontact them digitally so that, again, customizing the information for what they've said they're interested in, we can bring them into a deeper relationship with our organization. And for us, that might be volunteering, that might be just knowing more about what we do, that might be donating. It could be, it could be a lot of different things, but we talk about that as consideration for the American Cancer Society. And it's one of the metrics that we measure is, are more people deepening their consideration of the American Cancer Society as part of our brand health is something that we look at. But it's really important that all of those things are working together to say similar things. It's one of the reasons why we just, we've spent a lot of time thinking about our vision as an organization, ending cancer as we know it for everyone, making sure that everyone can say that same thing. So no matter where you're interacting with us, you're getting similar kinds of messages. It's interesting though, we just went through a massive brand refresh back in September of last year, 2022, which actually was the first time we've kind of touched our physical logo, our visual logo in a long time. We wanted to modernize, we wanted to update it, but because of all the physical infrastructure that exists, kind of in these events, we did talk about it. I talked about it from an evolution, not revolution standpoint, where it wasn't like, okay, we're going to flip the switch on September 28th and everything immediately is going to look like it's in the new brand. Once again, it's donor dollars, right? Shepherding donor dollars. If you've got some really good collateral or really good pieces that are still working for you, run that out before you actually switch over to the new brand, because we deliberately chose the new brand look and feel to where it was going to be a cousin to where we were before, not like a completely different planet from where we were before. So by choosing that evolution, not revolution approach in terms of how we evolved our look and feel, we were able to preserve the physical assets when we needed to and transition over as we needed to, again, just to make sure we were being good shepherds of our dollars.
Yeah. So when certain marketing materials are going to go obsolete or you're running that out, that's when you rebuild. You don't just trash everything. Work that brain in. There was a key word that you mentioned in that answer, Kymm, that I wanted to really highlight. And when you used the word relationship. And what I loved about how you sort of positioned that was that in your mind, physical marketing impressions and digital marketing impressions all are examples, tactical ways of building a relationship from a consumer or a customer with your brand. And those reinforce, both the initial outreach as well as reinforcing existing relationships and strengthening relationships with buyers, influencers, the market, the industry. I really, really wanted to, just highlight that. I loved how you used the word relationship. That was very powerful.
Well, thank you. And I think that we also have to make sure that the opportunities to build those relationships, that you think really holistically about all the different ways that are, for example, what's on my mind right now is call centers. We, in my organization, we have a call center that works with donor processing and also that trains volunteers. For some people, that is their only interaction with the American Cancer Society brand. So that relationship that call center person has when they're answering those questions or shepherding that person is super critical to our ability to form that relationship. So I think marketers need to take a very holistic view of all the different places that those relationships could be impacted or formed, and make sure that they're all positive and moving in the direction of helping to steward this person toward a deeper relationship with your organization.
Well, and let's take a look at relationships, internally as, from a leadership perspective. So, if I ask about your leadership experience, how do you always ensure you're being an authentic leader?
I think I was born this way. So I have the benefit, and also there's a downside to it. So it's not always a strength of just sort of being who I am no matter where I am. So I don't know how I came by it, but I show up in a really similar fashion no matter what environment you see me in. What I've had to learn, though, because as always with strengths, there's lots of times there's dark sides that are attached to it, is the importance of being effectively authentic. So there is my sweet spot in the middle where it takes very little energy for me to just be. For me, that includes being passionate, energetic. That just is the way I am. But in some instances, that's not the most effective way to show up. If I'm in a boardroom, if I am talking to people and wanting to be very objective and not coming across like I'm selling, I need to make sure that I dial that back. So I do think there is a range of effectiveness, and I do think it's really important that leaders and anyone really think about what that range is and how do you broaden it so that you can show up to somebody else, not just in your sweet spot, but maybe with a little bit of flex and a little bit of give, but yet it still feels like you are who you are. And noticing when you flex too much, where all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I don't recognize that person, and you've gone over the line. You should experiment to know where your line is so that you know where the edges that you're going to stay away from. But I do think it's a matter of really looking in the mirror, knowing yourself, recognizing that your strengths and dark sides are attached, and then how do you compensate with other areas? Another example from myself is I'm very optimistic. I'm definitely, a glass half full sort of person, which is a strength, but it can also carry with it the dark side of like, am I gonna spot the little holes in the argument? Am I going to come with an appropriate amount of pessimism that's going to enable me to come up with the plan B and the plan C if plan A doesn't work out? So I know that about myself. So it's really important that I find the pessimists on my team and that I listen to them and encourage them to speak out so that together collectively we don't miss something. So I think it's about just understanding who you are and what you bring, and where you might need to really enlist the help of other people to compensate for something that maybe isn't your natural, forehand.
Yeah, that's an astute observation. I really, really like that. So before we wrap up today's episode, what is the main takeaway you want to share to help understand the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
Oh, gosh. Well, I just think in today's world, there's just intense competition. And competition now is coming from so many different places, not just like within your industry. You think about the sea change that generative AI, as an example, is going to bring to marketing and communications. There's just competition from all sorts of places. There's pressure on costs. Marketing models. There's outdated marketing models that we need to rethink exactly for the reason that you were just talking about, the notion that people are experiencing brands in different ways, in physical, digital. How do you evolve the marketing model to be able to get after that? Demographics are changing. How do we make sure that we're being inclusive and we're not only inviting people to the table, but we're making the table equitable so that people actually feel heard and seen? All of those challenges are facing marketers today, and I think it's just important to recognize it, to do what you need to do to restore your personal energy, remembering that self-care is something that's really important, giving yourself grace, And then what I always try and do too is remember it's always in the change and in the challenges where you learn the most. So sometimes it really sucks, kind of like when you're in that position where you're like, how is this going to work? And why didn't this go the way I wanted it to go? But you learn more there. You learn more from failures than you do from successes. I think it's too easy to go from success to success to success and to think, well, maybe I'm pretty good at what I do and I touch these things and it turns to gold. Much harder to have like the failure. But when you do and you're forced to really look at it, you're like, okay, that's not something I'm going to do again because I learned this. I just think that the more times that you can fail and learn from it, the more different environments you put yourself in, the more learning you'll get. And to me, that's the fun part of being a marketer and the fun part of doing the job that I do. And so just embrace it, embrace the change.
That's spot on. Well, that wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kymm.
Oh, so fun. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, until next time, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.